Hey, welcome to Alabama Policy Insights. We are so fortunate to have Congressman Barry Moore with us today. We'll find a little bit about Barry Moore and who he is as a man and why he's in Congress and what he's up to. So thank you for joining us. Thank you for joining us.
Thanks, Stephanie. It's an honor to be on with you.
Yeah, absolutely. Happy to have you. You've been a conservative for a long time in the state of Alabama, a reliable conservative. Now you represent us in Congress, which we appreciate. And affiliated with API to one degree or another for a long time. Just tell us a little bit about yourself and really how you came to believe in the principles that you believe in.
Mainly from running a small business. I grew up, my dad had a little business down on Main Street in our hometown, and so interacting every day and seeing the challenges. And as Heather and I started our own company, we realized that very often the government wasn't coming alongside; they were more riding on our backs. And so
Right.
I just had this just conservative leanings to, limit government and open America for liberty. And part of that process, as Reagan said, the government side down the economy is when it's moving, they tax it. If it keeps moving, they regulate it. When it fails, they subsidize it. And I always thought if we could get the taxes and regulations out of the way, we wouldn't need the subsidies. The capitalist economy, what this nation was founded on, free markets, could help repair so many of the issues. And so just been kind of, I guess, the core of who we were, and it kind of shaped who I became as an adult. Mm-hmm. And so when we had this call in our lives to run for office, we just never really changed who we were.
Right. Well, we're glad.
It happens often, but there are a lot of pressures. But for us, it was just, I don't know. I guess I'm just silly enough to stick to who I am sometime, and no matter the pushback, we're going to do what we feel in our core that we should do.
No, absolutely. And you're pretty public about your faith and your depth of faith, and Heather is as well. I imagine that probably contributes to your thought processes as well.
No doubt. I would not be doing this. I don't even like politics, I tell everybody, but it was a calling on our life. And I'm sure Moses grumbled a little when he was having to lead the children of Israel, and I'm sure Noah every day building that boat wasn't fun. Right. But the calling on our life, the Lord certainly called us to this, and he gave me a great teammate, my wife. And so there is a God and we're not him, and very often he calls us to do things that are not difficult, but if you're willing to trust him, they're possible. I actually had I do my quiet times in the morning, and I had an entry in my journal that said an improbability becomes a possibility when you don't let your availability limit God's capabilities. And so there are things in life that seem impossible, but they become probable when you say yes to God. And so for us, it's kind of been him just calling us into these things and doing the impossible pretty often. And so it's been interesting to watch and kind of, in many ways, humbling, I would say, to be where we're at and to see his hand upon our lives and to have us in this process.
So you served in the National Guard, if I'm correct.
I did, yes, ma'am.
Okay. And was that through Auburn or through the ROTC program?
Just
or
6 years. No, just I joined the Guard, I think it was in 89, and did 6 years. And I grew up around Fort Rucker. And so many of my friends' dads were military. My dad was in the Guard. And so I always had a kind of an affinity for those fellows because I'd go to their houses and their dads would be Vietnam Air pilots telling all these stories. And I thought, man, that would be something we could do to serve. So we did spend 6 years in the Guard. And while I was at Auburn, I was on the Army Ranger Challenge team. So a lot of discipline through that process and a lot of learning. But just because of the family ties to the military and our friends and their families' ties, it just was always something I felt like I wanted to do.
Yeah, absolutely. And you've been a champion for veterans, both as a state legislator and then also as a member of Congress.
Yeah, I mean, my brother's a retired Marine. He was an F-18 guy. My son-in-law, Jack, who you know, he was an Army Ranger, served 6 years. And so it's just as part of that family dynamic that we all feel like we need to serve.
Just who you are.
Just who we are. That's exactly right.
Yeah. So between the combination of your faith and your family and your history with veterans and then your history as being a small business owner, that's really the combination of all of those things, it sounds like, is what really creates your political philosophy.
Yeah, and if you look at the district and even the state, we love our veterans in Alabama, and as conservatives, we love small business and we like limited government. And there are so many things about that, and plus we're the Bible Belt. I mean, and so yeah, I think in many ways, if you look at the state of Alabama, we've had a little time in those segments in our life that have prepared us to serve all the people in the state and the priorities of this great state.
Right. So tell us a little bit about how somebody who doesn't really like politics got to be a politician.
Well, it's interesting because in 2006, a Republican Party approached me about running, and I was like, I don't have any desire to do this.
Right.
And we had our little business going, and we had, young kids at home. And in 2008, Heather and I were actually we were getting ready. We're in the house, and Barack Obama came on and said, we're no longer a Christian nation. And I told my wife then, I said, if they ask us to run again, I said, we better engage in the process. We could very well lose our country. And so when the party came along and there was an opportunity in 2010 and they called me, I said, yes, we will do this. And so it was just a realization that if we as Christians don't engage this process and as conservatives get involved, we're going to lose our voice in government. And so that was kind of the thing that prodded us, along with a lot of prayer, obviously. And so we got elected in 2010, that first Republican majority in Alabama since Reconstruction. And so we started engaging and have been reluctantly drawn into a lot of other battles since then.
Yeah. So if my memory serves correctly, that seat that you occupied in the state legislature, that was longtime Democrat Terry Spicer's seat. Is that
exactly
right?
We beat a three-term Democrat. We've done the impossible so many times, but we did beat a three-term Democrat in 2010 to be part of that big majority, that red wave, if you will, in 2010.
Right. And in 2010, for those of y'all who are listening who don't follow Alabama politics quite as closely as we do, that was when, so there was 136 years of Democrat rule in the state of Alabama, and that was the first time that the Republicans had a majority in either the House or the Senate.
That's right. We had, for the first time, House and Senate, and so we started doing some really remarkable things, and I think trying to put the state more representative, the government of the state more representative of the people of Alabama. And so yeah, there's that first Republican majority, like I said, since the Civil War, 136 years after Reconstruction. And we went to work then, and along the way, it's been odd, but Heather and I have been in a lot of historic positions over the years.
Right. I don't want to call you the Forrest Gump of Alabama politics, but you've been in the room.
I feel like I'm running some days of just running to nowhere, but yes, you're right.
And on the stage for a lot of important moments. Speaking of important moments, when now President Trump first came to Alabama, that fateful day in Mobile on the stage. Walk us through that.
Yeah, so Heather and I, we've been in the state legislature going on year 5. It was August 21st, 2015, and this guy calls and says, hey, Donald Trump's coming to Alabama. Would y'all like to meet him? And Heather's like, we should go meet him. She says, watch him on Instagram or Twitter or whatever it was. Right. And she says, D3 has normal birthday parties like we do, and they get a little cake. She said, they're probably normal people. We should go meet meet Donald Trump. And at the time, we had Rubio coming to Alabama in a few days. He was running for president.
Ted Cruz, who else?
Scott Walker
Jeb
was
Bush,
coming.
There were tons of them.
They were all coming, and they were wanting our endorsement. And so Heather and I, actually, we got to Lab People Stadium, and we were on the south end of Lab People Stadium, and a fellow tapped on the door and said, would any of you guys be willing to endorse President Trump today? And out of a couple of hundred elected officials, Heather and I were like, wow, we need to pray about this. So we just went down the hall and said a quick prayer, and we got a piece about endorsing a guy who literally had no chance. They said he's one of 17. He's got a 1% chance of getting the nomination, and he certainly will not be Hillary Clinton. That was a conventional wisdom. But we got a piece about endorsing him. So as we were going through the tunnel towards the stage, I'll never forget Jump from Van Halen was playing, and all these people were screaming Trump. And that's 1984 album, the year I graduated high school. I thought, well, this is a pretty good omen, right? As we're going through the tunnel, my buddy looks at me and goes, hey, man, do you want to go first or you want to go last? There's only 4 out of a couple hundred elected officials that's going to endorse this gentleman. And so I said, well, I guess I'll go first. And so I became the first elected official at a stadium event to endorse Donald Trump, August 21st, 2015, 10 years ago now. Wow. And so we've been on the train since long before it left the station, but he was an outsider, and I think he was God's man for this time in our nation. And so we were honored to be called to endorse him and been in the fight with him ever since.
Well, and at the time, you were the most conservative member of the Alabama legislature, so that was a feather in his cap as well. Yeah,
that's exactly right. Out of 105 members in the House and 35 in the Senate, we were always number 1 and number 2, and it was always a battle between me and a couple of my conservative buddies who was going to win this year. But and I was chairman of Veterans Affairs at the time, and I think I was vice chair of Small Business and Commerce. So there were some people wanting our endorsement, but we felt led by the Lord to that day to endorse a man from New York City. And it was odd because he said 3 cuss words that day from the stage, and I thought, oh, we have done it, But honestly, the Lord knew what he was doing and had us get involved in that early on. And so we've been in the fight with him for 10 years now.
Yeah. Well, and you've had your fair share of lawfare yourself.
Yes.
Your family was attacked in a similar manner. What year was that?
2014.
in 2014, and how long did it last?
So it started about my reelection. Imagine that.
Shocking.
My trial was actually a few days before the elections in Alabama. So it was kind of odd how all the timing worked out, but it probably started about 9 months prior to the 2014 election. And so they indicted us. I was facing 40 years in prison. And I tell everybody, I was a General Flynn before there was a General Flynn. It was literally a perjury trap they set for me. And the deal was, if I would walk away from my office, and the 2 top conservatives in Alabama got indicted. And so the deal was, if I would walk away, things would probably get better for my family and for me and personally. But I was literally thinking about it. I was on the phone with my attorneys, and they're like, man, if you stay in this race, they're going to destroy you. Financially, they're going to destroy you. Personally, they're going to destroy you. Politically, they're going to destroy you. And so I hang up the phone with all my attorneys, and I go over there. My 12-year-old son was in the carport. And I said, hey, buddy, we're going to have to drop out of this race. It's just the price is going to be high. They're going to destroy us if we stay in this race. And now this was a team of high-powered attorneys that said, cut a deal, walk away. But my son said, hey, Dad, he said, I've been reading the book of Daniel. He said, when all those men bowed, there were men who stood. And he said, I think we need to stand. And so here I got a 12-year-old boy standing on the word versus a team of high-paid attorneys telling me to take the deal and walk away. And so we made a decision that day we would win the case and we would win the race. And so we literally won a primary under felony indictment in Alabama. I don't know if a Republican's ever done that.
I'd have to look that up. I'd be surprised.
And then we won the case, but the verdict was October 30th of 2014, a few days before the November election. And so it was a powerful process in my life. It really did change who I was as a man, because I had to humble myself before the Lord, because we were literally in the refiner's fire. And but he told me that day, he said, this is not your tearing down, this is your bringing up. He said, 3 days in the belly of a whale. And so I was in court for 3 days, and then he told me, he said, remember Paul on the road to Damascus. And that was that road to Damascus for Barry and his family. So we literally, it totally transformed who we were. And so from that point forward, we said, we're going to seek the Lord, and because he is God and we are not, and so we're going to trust him. And so we were called, we won and served another term there. The Lord told us to endorse Trump, but it didn't make any sense.
Right.
We ran for Congress. In 2020, it was a 7-way primary. We did the impossible there. The districts were redrawn in 24. The Lord never makes it easy for Barry. But
seems that way.
I have found that if he will make it easy, I might get a little bit, relaxed, a little bit less obedient.
Right.
And the challenge is often, if you'll stay on your knees before the Lord, that's when you're the strongest. And so our process of being humble before the Lord has really made us a force through his glory to be reckoned with. Does that make sense?
No, totally. Absolutely. Well, and the support of your family, obviously, is a huge impact on. It was a huge impact on you then, but is still a huge impact on the way you serve.
That whole 2014 had a tremendous impact on all my kids. We had to learn to stand on our faith individually.
Were all of them still home at that time?
They were all in school, actually. Okay. Kathleen, I think, was a senior. Claudia was maybe in the 10th grade. Wow. Jeb was in the 7th grade. And for every day there, the left was running these ads, me and behind bars. I was never behind bars. But it was just a total affront. I mean, they just literally set out to destroy us. Even though we didn't bow to the system politically, they thought we were vulnerable. And so, but, Heather says this, that our kids learn to stand on their own faith. Because, we go to church as a family. And a lot of times kids coattail on their parents' faith, but we were under such attacks that we all had to learn to put on the full armor of God, like Ephesians 6, individually.
Right.
And so it was the worst time in our family's life, but it was the best time for growing our faith. And it certainly transformed all of us. So we have an old saying now, ain't nobody going to jail today. So no matter what comes at us in life, because of the process that we went through in 2014, we realize that it could be a whole lot worse. We just need to be grateful for what God's doing and trust him in the process.
Yeah, and just that amount of perspective, and you carry that with you every day. It allows you to have a different level of boldness, maybe even, and say some things that aren't politically feasible, or things that are truthful, that aren't the smartest political thing to
Absolutely.
say.
I mean, when you think about it, if I've got to go to Judiciary Committee, or I've got a bill on the floor, or I'm under a press hit, or whatever it is that's going on, you can always check back and go, well, you know what? I've been through worse. The Lord has prepared me for this. And through that process, he's really prepared us to fight a battle that I think we're stronger than we realize very often.
Right. Well, and it's interesting going through that process and then now serving on the Judiciary Committee. That's the Lord's redemption, if nothing else.
Oh, for sure. And when General Flynn was going through that, and when the President Trump was going through that, and his team and our friends were all being indicted, and it was just, we knew the road. We knew what they were going through. And often we were communicating with them. Here's what's happening. Here's what's going on. And so because we had that experience level, we could relay that experience to some of our friends who had never been, I'd never been on that side of the Justice Department. I mean, I might have got a speeding ticket, but I'd never literally been facing 40 years in prison. And so when you see them weaponize and come after you, destroy you financially and politically and personally. So you can encourage your friends and say, I've been there and I've done that. And
give them strength.
Absolutely. And say, just trust the Lord. Just trust the Lord, because that process for us was like the River Jordan. You know, when the children of Israel crossed the River Jordan, the first thing they did was circumcise when they got on the other side. The cutting away of the flesh.
Right.
That's a painful process. But if you will cut the flesh away, once the Lord calls you into what he's called you into, if you can do away with the flesh and you can yield to the Spirit, then there is no limit to what God can do with you. And so he can take just a garbage man in Baton's Crossroads, Alabama, and put him on Judiciary Committee, and I can literally be questioning the Attorney General under Biden. And there's a certain amount of courage and guidance there that you just can't find in any other way except being in the fire.
Yeah, that's right. And being on judiciary has to be quite the experience, not being an attorney. But I imagine it gives you an opportunity to kind of speak up for every man.
It does. And, and that's probably one of the most divisive committees. Literally, we had Adam Schiff on this side. We had Nadler, Swalwell. We got, you just named the worst of the worst for the other side.
And it's villains.
It's like, it's not a very bipartisan committee. It's like you got Jim Jordan over here and me and Gates and all these guys and Chip Roy and all of us fighting against the worst of the worst, what we call the worst, the leftist and the brilliant people, really. I mean, they're smart people on the law. But it just really is it's an interesting committee, and it allows you to. For me, when Jim asked me to do that, we were sitting on the floor, and Jim Jordan comes up and sits down and goes, "Hey, why don't you get on Judiciary Committee?" And I'm like, "Jim, man, I am a garbage man in Baton's Crossroads, Alabama. I'm not an attorney. I am not your guy." And he's like, "Well, just pray about it and think about it." He said, "But Grassley's a farmer, and he does a heck of a job in the Senate." And so that did strike a chord with me that sometimes you need something other than attorneys.
Right.
Sometimes you need guys who are just common sense, going to ask the questions, not the section and code in the law, but just the common sense questions that somebody sitting in a living room around a dining room table would want to know the answers to.
How does this work?
Yeah.
And why?
And why is this the case, And so literally like just common sense approach to it sometimes is neat, and we need more of that in government.
Yeah. What's been your favorite thing, or it could be the one big beautiful bill that y'all just accomplished, which was huge. But what's been your maybe even your hardest fight or your biggest victory since you've been in Congress?
So I think certainly the big beautiful bill, because I feel like it's so important. And Heather was on our neck. Y'all got to get some bills passed. But we literally had every committee, all 12 committees, working towards what the instructions were. To get this big, beautiful bill across the finish line. And it is certainly the largest tax cuts the American people have seen. Right. We're asking able-bodied people to go to work. We're going to take the tax off tips. We're going to secure the border. We're going to take tax off overtime, Social Security. All those things are all in one big, beautiful bill. So that is a huge accomplishment, not just for me individually, but for the Speaker, Mike Johnson, for him to be able to get that, for them to be able to get it through the Senate, but for the president before the midterms. And with being retroactive, people can literally go back and take the tax off all the tips they've made this year and all the overtime they've made in Social Security. And so for the president, I'm thinking for the country, we needed to get a win. He's doing a lot with regulations, and I think they're doing a fine job with some things that they're doing in the executive branch. But legislatively, that's got to be a big win for us.
Yeah, 100%. That's interesting. We started the ALDOGE program here at the Alabama Policy Institute last December. And, at the time, the Doge thing was the big deal. Musk was still kind of blowing and going in D.C. and finding a lot of things, finding, a lot of waste and mismanagement of funds. We're still working on that here in Alabama. And people are pretty surprised to see some of the waste and kind of mismanagement. I personally think that comes from a different framework of kind of a misunderstanding that every dollar is a taxpayer dollar. And so that we should be good stewards of that, if you're working in government versus public money or government money. Yeah,
there's no such thing as government money. We don't, we just take it from people who are paying it in, and then we spend it, and not always so wisely. So I'm excited to hear that. And and then just like we did a rescission last week, it's something that Doge found on NPR, PBS. We were literally funding those stations to put out propaganda for the leftists, and they had very few conservative people on their shows, but we were funding that with the taxpayers' money. And I thought, that's not free press. That's paid for press. courtesy of the big government in Washington, D.C. and the swamp
Absolutely.
itself. So yeah, I think that you're shocked when you start seeing the amount of waste, fraud, and abuse. The money we sent to foreign countries with no oversight.
Absolutely. The
Just
USA
crazy stuff going on. And that just burdens us. Our kids and grandkids will be buried in that debt. At $37 trillion, the interest is literally $105,000 a second right now. And so I'm encouraged by the what we're doing with the tax cuts, and certainly trying to cut. We're cutting $1.5 trillion in spending in the big beautiful bill, but the DOGE rescissions, those kind of things down the way that we'll be able to get in place. The country is winning again, and I think we literally are at a golden age in our nation. We a long way to go. We didn't get here overnight. We're not going to fix it overnight, but the speed at which this administration moved has been quite amazing, honestly.
No, I agree. I mean, we've just hit the 6-month mark, if I'm correct. What do you think's next? What do you think when you get back up to D.C., what's next?
So I think we'll continue to look at rescissions, and we've got to
explain to people what that is.
So it's just finding the spending that the federal government has already authorized, and certainly with USAID, I was one of similar, probably a few no votes last cycle, because just the money that USAID, I understand, was originally set up for like the CIA to have one line item on the budget and then to work covert operations, but it got hijacked over the years by the Democrats and these NGOs. And so I think we'll continue to find things like USAID and PBS that we can rescind. And then I think the president would like for us to actually do an appropriations process and go through the 12, but committees and get our budgets in place, and actually something they haven't done in decades we need to do.
Most people don't know that.
No.
Most people don't understand that process.
Yeah, we just do CRs, just continuing resolutions, continue to spend with no line item, just no microscope on what we're actually doing. And so I think that we'll probably see some of those things, and there'll probably be some other things the president wants to get done. And there have been some bills introduced to some of his executive orders that we need to codify to make sure that, because he's doing these executive orders, and that's great. But when you get an auto pen in behind him they undo it all really quick, it needs to be codified. And so I think we'll continue to work on the EOs, the appropriation process, and rescissions.
Yeah. Well, and the lack of stability, and you would probably argue what I argue, which is it would be really nice if Congress and the presidency didn't matter as much, because we're kind of states' rights people and people who want to make our own decisions in our own state. But with the system as big and as bloated as it is right now, it really does make a difference in people's personal lives, what y'all are doing and what you're cutting, and the taxes that you're cutting, and the things that are impacting them on a day-to-day basis.
Yeah, and if you talk to even defense contractors, they hate CRs because they really don't know, like if they're trying to design an R&D equipment for us to be on the battlefield, they just really don't know what numbers they're working with and what they got to work with. And so, yeah, I think that people assume we do budgets every year, but we haven't in decades, and so that's something that I think the president will want us to do, and it makes sense for the American people. We should be on it. If you're living on a budget, we should be on a budget,
Absolutely.
And so I think you'll see a lot of great things. And, obviously with the new big, beautiful bill, we'll have the Golden Dome funding, because we saw how well that Iron Dome has worked for Israel. And there's concerns about some ballistics and some things that we need to be able to defend against here. So we'll continue to do those things, fund the border wall. There's a lot of priorities in there that I think are meaningful that we'll probably try to get across the finish line along with some of the EOs.
One of the things that I've never asked you about or talked to you about one-on-one is your commitment to Israel. Speak to me, I assume it's from faith, but speak to me about your thought process on monetary support of Israel, spiritual support of Israel, and just kind of your thought process on that.
Yeah, so for me, it's really simple, right? It's Genesis 12:3. If you bless Israel, you'll be blessed. If you curse Israel, you'll be cursed. And so for us as a nation, I think it's very important that we stand with Israel. They, the few times I've been over there, they are all defensive weapon systems. So whether it's the Iron Beam, the Iron Dome, reactive armor on their tanks, everything Israel does is just to exist. I mean, they would live in peace with the world around them if the world around them would live in peace with them, and they simply do not want to do that. And so as an ally in that area and as God's chosen people, and you can look at Kings, or you can look at Chronicles, or you can go through a number of books, the geographic area is pretty well defined in the Bible. And Jesus is coming back to the Mount of Olives, not Mount Everest, Mount of Olives.
Right.
And so we have to make sure that we understand that there is a bigger thing at play here than just, what we may personally believe or the leadership in Israel's changed. No, the Lord bless that nation, and we need to bless that nation. Now, there were evil kings and there were bad kings over the years, and the Lord would allow them to suffer, but he never really turned and bless the nations that attacked Israel. And so I think for us, is we know that from our faith as Christians, we have a responsibility to protect Israel. And I think as a nation, we'll be blessed if we do that.
I totally agree. And I will say, and I'm not naive and I'm not new to this world, but the anti-Semitism surprised me. The level of anti-Semitism, especially across college campuses, and then just really just kind of in daily life. The rise of anti-Semitism in our just general society over the last several years has really shocked me.
By the very people that call us Nazis. That's what's been so weird. The leftists
Strange.
have been the ones that have been attacking Israel, and then they'll turn and call you a Nazi. I mean, the anti-Semitism that we saw at Columbia and those different universities and those professors and just how openly and blatantly it was out there. So we talked earlier, it's a spiritual battle. And so we see that there's a reason those people are under attack, and it's a spiritual battle. And so, it just the veil, the way it's being pulled back, and what we saw from the left over the years. And then just like you said, whether it's anti-Semitism or whatever the case may be, they're showing their true colors. And so it has been shocking at the speed at which things moved in the last 4 years.
Right.
And so, you can pick an issue where they want to send these folks into our classrooms, these trans, to teach our children, or put men and girls sports. Just so many things that used to, I thought they would probably kind of do it behind the scenes, and they're out front with it. And same with anti-Semitism. It moved very rapidly.
Yeah, and it feels to me a little bit, not a little bit, a lot bit, as an attack on the family. A lot of those kinds of issues, to me, it goes back to the spiritual, and I'm sure it does to you. But it also just feels like there's really an understanding, even by folks on that side, that the family is the cornerstone of society. And so because the family is that cornerstone, that's what they have to attack.
Absolutely.
And I feel like, especially over the last several years, although I feel like maybe that pendulum is shifting a little bit. People are more awake to it. It has been so in your face, for the last couple of years that, I think that people are figuring it out and pushing back against it now. But it really feels like an attack specifically on the family unit to me.
Yeah, and it literally, the building blocks of our communities are our families. And honestly, the building block of this nation is communities within the states, and then the states are united to make this great United States of America. And so if they can destroy our families, then our nation's very fabric will be eroded. And so many of these people, they hate this nation, and they want to destroy us. They don't like what we stand for. They certainly don't appreciate our friends in Israel and those sort of things. And so, it's an attack on the family. And you see it across so many different social media platforms, and even some of the things now that are even going on in our churches is staggering to me.
Absolutely.
I don't know what Bible you're reading, but it's not the one I'm reading.
Right.
And so there is certainly an attack on the family. And again, I think it goes back to a spiritual battle. Everything goes back to a spiritual battle, right? Because God ordained the family. He blesses the family. And so if they can destroy that, they can literally destroy communities, states, and our government and our nation.
Right. Well, we know that God is a God of order. And so when we see disorder or confusion, we know that's not of God. And so that's kind of the demarcation for me and at API. And so it's just so clear to me that so much of that confusion really is sad and an unfortunate and a brokenness that really needs to be addressed from that viewpoint, more so than from an attack back viewpoint. Try to reach people in the way that God would.
Amen. And honestly, if you like the way that so many communities have been destroyed is they took the father out of the home, and if you don't have the father and the mother in there imparting wisdom and teaching those children and like you said, organized, not chaotic, but organized life, then you start to see it. And there is certainly chaos in communities where we've destroyed those families. And
absolutely.
And that's a good way to look at it. I've never thought, but I'm reminded I was going through an airport not too long ago. And, you have to go through TSA and do all that. And then they had this called the recombobulation zone. And I thought, the airport literally had a sign that said recombobulation zone. As a nation, we need to be in our recombobulation zone. We need to focus on what really, really matters and get our chaos back under control and build our families and
back in order.
Not reward failure.
Amen.
We often penalize success in this country. If you're a married couple trying to raise kids, you're penalized. And if you're not raising you don't have a family, then somehow we reward that sort of thing. And so I think we have to get back to rewarding success and quit rewarding failure.
And to me, that feels like a back to the roots of the American dream.
Yes, absolutely, absolutely. And then there is no planet on face of this earth, or no nation on the face of this planet, I should say, like America, and the opportunities that are here. But we could have, and very closely, I think, in many ways, could have lost our way. If I think we figured it out. Like you said, people are they're waking up. And I think because the left moves so hard, so fast, that it kind of pulled the veil back, and people went, wait a minute. This is not what we want for our family, for our kids, our country.
Right.
And so hopefully we're seeing great things on the horizon.
Absolutely. Well, thank you for being with us. Thank you for your leadership through the years. I know it's not always your favorite thing to fly up and back and represent us, but we really do appreciate your thoughtful and biblical leadership through the years. So
well,
thank you for being with us.
Thank you. Keep us in your prayers.
Absolutely. We will. Thank you so much. And that's Alabama Policy Insights with Congressman Barry Moore. Thank you so much for joining us.